Hi everyone, my name is Deepthi. Welcome to Learn English with Deepthi. In this video, we'll take a look at advice with an SE and advice with a CE. These two words look alike, sound alike, and they also mean almost alike, so they're confusing to a lot of people. So today, let's take a look at these two words and figure out the correct way to use them. So first, I will tell you the difference between these two words, and then I'll give you some tips and tricks to figure out which of these words to use in any sentence, and then we'll look at a few examples. First, let's take a look at the word advise, that ends in the letter CE. This word is a noun. It means a recommendation or a suggestion that we are giving to somebody, often to help them out with something. So advise is something that we usually give somebody or get from somebody. So an example would be, I don't need your advice. That is an example of the use of the noun form of advice. So one thing we need to know about this word is that it is an uncountable noun. An uncountable noun is a kind of noun that does not have a plural form. So we would never say advises. That word does not exist. Advices, that is not a correct word. So how would we represent when somebody gives you more than one advice? What is the correct way to do that? So let's take a look at that. So if somebody gives you one advice, also one thing you need to remember is we do not say a advice or an advice. That is wrong. So we use a piece of advice. He gave me a piece of advice. That is the correct form to say it. Or he gave me some advice. He gave me a lot of advice. These are all correct forms. He gave me 2 pieces of advice. That is also correct. So remember to not use advice, the noun form, with plural because it does not have a plural. Now let's take a look at the verb form, which is the advice that ends in SE, ADVISE. This is a verb. We can say it as advised, advising, advises. These are all used with the SE word, advise. So what does that mean? That word means the act of giving a recommendation or suggestion to somebody to help them out with something. This is the act. It's something that you do. Advise with an SE is something that you do. That's what you need to remember. Advice with a CE is something that you give or get, and advice with an SE is something that you do. Here's an example of the word advise, the verb form used in a sentence. The teacher advised her students to get some sleep. So here we see that it's used in the past form, advised. The teacher advised her students. So that's an example of the word being used in the verb form. Now here are some tips and tricks that will help you figure out which of these words to use in a given sentence. The first tip that I'll give you is that if you look at a sentence and you see that advice is something that somebody is giving somebody or getting from somebody or taking from somebody or following, these are all means of understanding that we have to use a form there. Remember, when we talked about advice with the CE, we said that it's something that you give or get. So if you see a sentence and it says, for example, he took my advice and passed the exam. So when we say he took advice, that means that we have to use the noun form there, ADVICE. That is the correct form to use there. The second tip is that, again, take a look at the sentence. Is advice used with a possessive form of a noun or a pronoun? Like my advice, his advice, John's advice. If it's used with the possessive form of a noun or pronoun, then also we would use the noun form of the word there, ADVICE. That is what we would use. Here's an example. She followed the doctor's advice. The doctor's advice, that is the possessive form of the word doctor, doctor's advice. So then we would know that we have to use the noun form, ADVICE. The third tip is, see if the sentence will be grammatically correct if you take out advice and put in another verb. I like to use tell because that's similar to advise. So if the sentence will be correct grammatically, if we can substitute tell instead of advise, then we know that we have to put the verb form of advise, which is the one that ends with se. An example is, I can advise you, but you must make the decision. So let's see if we can put tell in there. I can tell you, but you must make the decision. That is correct, right? That is grammatically correct. Now we know that the verb form should go there, so we put advise there. The last tip that I give you is, if you see advise being used as past tense or continuous form, advising, advised, advises, only a verb can be used in any of those forms. The noun cannot be used in the past form or continuous form or anything. So at that time we would know that it is the verb form that we would use in that sentence. That is the one that with the se. Here's an example. Who is advising you? We see that it's the ing form of it. So we know that it's a verb. Advising, S-I-N-G. Now let's take a look at some examples. First example is, what would you advise me to do? What do you think? What goes there? The SE form or the CE form? So let's go through our tips. The first tip, what was our first tip? First tip was that if it's something that you're giving or getting, then we would use a noun form. Are we giving or getting something there? We're not quite sure, right? It doesn't say. The second tip is there a possessive? Is it used with the possessive noun or pronoun? Are we seeing your advice, his advice? No, it says what would you advise. That is not a possessive form. So that tip doesn't help us. Now let's go to the third tip. The third tip was that try to substitute tell in there. Let's try that. What would you tell me to do? Is that correct? Yeah, that is correct. That is a grammatically correct sentence. So now we know that a verb belongs there. So what is a verb form of advice? It is the one that ends with se. So we put that in there. Here's the next example. Whose advice are you following? Which tip do you think we can use there? The second tip. The second tip was, if advice is used with a possessive noun or pronoun, then we would use the noun form of advice. So whose is the possessive form of the word who? Whose advice? My advice, his advice, right? So whose is a possessive form, so we can use the noun form of advice, which is the one that ends with ce. Next one is, my mother advises me. This is the one that follows the last tip that I gave you. Advised, advising, advises. When you see these kind of words, only a verb can be used like that. So we know that it is a verb form, which is the one that ends with se, advise, se. Here's the last example. Please advise me. So here let's try our third tip there, which is, let's try to switch out advise and put tell in there. Please tell me. Is that correct sentence? Is that grammatically correct? Yes, it is, right? Please tell me is a perfectly correct sentence. So we know that the verb form goes there, which is the one that ends in se. Please advise me. Now let's take a look at how can we write this exact same sentence using the noun form. How can we do that? We would say, please give me some advice. Please advise me is the same as please give me some advice with the ce. So I hope this video has helped you understand advise, the noun form, and advise, the verb. If you found this video helpful, please like it and please subscribe to my channel. If you think your friends or family would find this useful, please share it on your social media. Thank you for watching.